Okay, so welcome to the second Timeless Education exam. And we will continue from where we left off. I don't think we need to introduce the point of this and so on. I only want to say that, well, it is the same participants as last time, Bolelo, Christian, and Martina. And this time we are also joined by Frank from Sweden. And just to get the ball rolling a little bit and warm up, I want to ask Frank the same question that I asked of the others in the previous exam, to name a concept in timeless education apart from the main formula and the energy types.
Yeah, I guess one concept could be the natural man, I guess.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, it's a concept, natural man. It's kind of equal to the energy types, but it contains other information as well. But yeah, that's just so we get warmed up.
Yeah, I could take the cultural man or the.
Yeah, sure.
It doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't. And before we continue, before we proceed with the new concepts, I want to return to timeless parameters that I talked about, that we talked about at the beginning of the first exam. And so I want to ask, because then I asked what the third and 10th timeless parameter was, and now I want to ask what the 6th timeless parameter is in my list and why it is important.
Yeah.
And yeah, you raise your hand as before. All right, Christian.
So I think if I remember correctly, you call it consciousness, but then if you rephrase it, it's non-attached awareness. And then why it's important? It's basically important so that then, well, I think it's actually the most important aspect, because once you sort of, well, non-attached awareness, it's basically, that's what I like to call non-identification, which is something you call it too. And I think that's where you're able to actually see things clearly without yeah, I don't know, that's hard to explain.
It is an element of, like, the fundamental element of self-control or free will, if you will.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, because
it's like everything sort of revolves around that, and it's like the most, like what people most commonly think of as the most spiritual aspect.
Yeah.
Of course, it can be misunderstood or misconstrued, and so I kind of agree with you that it is. You could argue that it is the most important, but that leaves me to a kind of follow-up question. And that is that, like, pure awareness or non-attached observation and its related misconception that one's awareness is all there is. That is sort of the most common way people tend to, like, misinterpret or distort spirituality. That it's about, like, you have a control because you are the only one. It's your awareness creates everything and things like that. But it has a fundamental flaw. This like spiritual point of view or aspect. And what is this flaw, and how does timeless education attempt to fix it?
Well, you could say that one of the flaws, I'm not sure this is what the flaw you're referring to, but one flaw could be that it's too one-sided, that it's not in alignment with the what is it called, the alpha omega?
Yeah, chi omega.
Yeah, that formula is like, because it only says that awareness is the only thing that exists, then it's not balanced in accordance to that principle, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was the answer you were looking for, but
Well, it's close. I was thinking specifically that common spirituality doesn't have any real answer to the question of doing or why there is illusion or things like that. And you mentioned the formula as how it fixes things. But related to this is also the idea of to consider surprise and reciprocal maintenance or energy exchange, like in terms of, for example, human types and so on, for clues to this question of doing. Like, okay, so everything is illusion, you are the only thing existing, or you practice spirituality and you detach from everything. But then what exactly do you do? What is there some aim you're supposed to do if there is no aim? And then you have to balance that, like detached passivity or practice with something that allows you to find something to do in the world.
Yeah, there are some like neo advice. I think you linked to an article in one of your blog posts about the advaitants that deny the existence of basically everything and just says that there is no doing, there is no you, there's only this, there's only like one thing. And I think that was one of your best articles, because you brought up like, okay, but why does it matter to, like, even if that is the case, we are still left with a problem of like in the illusion we need to do something, just like if we're playing a video game, just pointing out that you're playing a video game doesn't help you win the game, or like doesn't contribute even to you enjoying the game.
Yeah, it's like maybe there is a point to the illusion if there is illusion. Like, why is there illusion? So that is sort of like the question. Yeah, you can, even if you like back away from everything and you exit the universe and look down upon the universe. Well, okay, you have this godlike objective view of things, but then are we really supposed to have that view? I mean, we were put in this universe for some reason, or it must exist for some reason, or there should be some answer to that. Yeah, Christian.
Sorry, I've been wanting to say something for a while. So I was going to mention too about how there's other parts of us as well. So it's like, even though you're detached or you're not attached to those things, we still need to sort of understand what those things are and how they function. Because I remember you talking about, you just mentioned about illusion and why we have illusion, or why we have, I mean, to me, that just sounds like falsity. Like, why do we have truth and not truth, and we need to know what is true? And I think of that as like when we try to improve science or philosophy or psychology or anything really, we need to sort of know how to think, sort of. So I feel like just being detached isn't the only thing to do, I guess.
But
and like
sorry, I thought you were finished.
No, it's okay, go ahead.
But could it be like, because I was thinking about, you said that there has to be a point. Does it really have to be a point, like for there to be, like, maybe it just happened without reason, like without a point, or like inherent to there being an illusion isn't necessary. Like, just because you have an illusion, why does it have to be a point?
Yeah, but you can say the same thing about escaping the illusion. Does it have to be a point to escaping the illusion either? Like,
Exactly.
like, yeah.
Well, yeah, I think in the blog too, you mentioned how we could do that, but is it wise to even do so? Like, is it really something majority of people should do anyways? Like, if it's so hard to do, then maybe we're not all meant to do that. Whereas then you're looking for what is essential to functioning, I guess, being a human. Concrete.
Yeah. So should we continue on with the next concept?
Sure.
Right, I did have one more thing that I have written up here. Yeah, so given that pathology must be separated from natural drives or desires that are necessary to motivate movement and things like reciprocal maintenance, how should one define the ego or false self in timeless education? Yeah, Christian.
Okay. Well, when the way I guess I define the ego, I think of it as like identification with something you're not. So, because I feel like whenever you identify with something you're not, then since it can't be you, then you don't have any ground, I guess. That basically wouldn't be you, so it'd be like it would be a false self because it's not you really. It's just something that's happening, or it's like a process that's occurring. So I think of the ego as something that someone is identified with and think is them, and then it becomes like a sort of, I don't know.
But would you call the ego, like when you're identified with the body, for example?
Yeah.
Is that an ego?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, that's how I would explain it. It's like a concept sort of, because it's like when you're saying you're something, it's like it's not that you're identifying with an idea, I guess. It's more.
Can you say something?
Yeah. Okay, Bolero.
Yes, I agree with Christian. An ego, I'd say, according to timeless education, an ego has got to do with me identifying with something. But then the problem is that 1,000 people will then identify with 1,000 different things. Timeless education seeks to get to the essence, to the bottom of everything else. So what is that thing that is not different? What is that thing that is the same in all of us? So I think that's how timeless education clears the matter of the ego, to say that the ego is something that's superficial, but there is that which doesn't change. What is that? Because I think intrinsically we human, all of us, we're just the same.
Yeah, so you could say that the ego is anything that is like, it's like the identification with anything other than that pure essence that is common to everyone. Martina.
Yeah.
Yes, I would say that the ego chooses but doesn't know what it chooses. Thus, it's anything but timeless man.
Yeah. Well, I would be careful not to confuse ego with like natural drives and things like that, since we need something to like motivate us. We shouldn't be too quick to. There can be this tendency for some people to like refer to anything as ego.
Yeah, that's what I do.
Just pointing to any action, but you know, action needs to happen in some way. We need to like be motivated to do things, and we have a natural drive to have like food and shelter and things like that, and so we should have a balanced view and focus on if there is something like an ego or false self, we should focus on that which is like delusion, that which is driven by illusion more than something that is like something like nature pushing us, I guess.
Yeah. Andreas. Sorry. Is it okay if I?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, cool. So I was also I feel like through practicing, not identifying with things, I feel like because even when you're not identified with things are still going to occur and take place. So I just feel like the less you identify with things, then in a weird way, I feel like what's more natural and authentic will come out sort of by itself. When you're not...
Even like cultural conditioning, like you are an American, for example, and we are from Sweden, and that will like our upbringing will have programmed into us certain beliefs and mannerisms that we will express regardless if we identify with them or not.
Yeah.
All right, should we carry on?
I think so.
Then we get to energy bias psychology. And so my next question is, what are the 3 basic types in energy bias psychology? Martina?
Well, sapientium, gratum, and morem.
Yes. And do you know where these derive from? Well, I can ask everyone, like how would you describe these?
Well, do I
Yeah,
answer?
you can answer.
Okay. I suppose it's based on the number 3, or the basic principles, which is alpha, omega, and chi. And then the formula of all the primary basic energy pattern is based on, let's say, an analogy with a number 4, and then you create the number 9.
Yes. Does anyone want to describe like what these 3 fundamental types are like their qualities? Bolelo.
Okay, in my own words, I would say these 3 fundamental qualities refer to sapientium would be the people who lean towards functioning with the head, I would say. And then you get your the midsection would be the people who lean towards expressing themselves more emotionally, and then the physical, I call it the physical types at the bottom, who are people who would more physically active. They express, their personality expresses more in a physically active way.
Yeah.
That's how I summarize it.
Yeah. The terms I use tend to think of them is like the sapientium I think of as mental fantastical. So mental is pretty easy. It's associated with the head and like intellect and concepts and things like that. But I add fantastical to sort of emphasize that sapientium tends to be a bit unconventional in a kind of remote way, not just unconventional in that they might be outrageous in the way they dress or something, but they are like interested in very strange things that normal people consider to be kind of strange. So fantastical is like, yeah.
I think of it as like outer space, like it's out there, you know. It's like, what are you talking about?
Unconventional.
Yeah. And Gratum, I tend to nickname social anxious. So it's not just social, like social can easily be associated with extraversion and being very sort of having a large group of friends, but anxious I think adds that there can be an ambivalence towards that, and like it also has to do with the limbic system and emotions that are tends to like be associated with anxiety. This like a basic fear response, and the Morem types I tend to nickname vital desensitized. Desensitized because they tend to be a bit more thick-skinned. So they are not just action-oriented and physical, but they are also the reason why they are that way is because they are more thick-skinned, and that also makes them less prone to contemplate things. And they suffer less, so they also question things less. And this also corresponds to the three parts of the brain, like the neocortex, the limbic system, and the brainstem. So my next question, so anyone want to mention what the names of the 9 primary types are? The primary. Christian.
Okay. So in the sapientium sphere, or the mental fantastical, that's for the localization, you have fiducium, and then for the reflection of the social sphere in the mental sphere, you have magnitudinum, and then the reflection of the vital energy in the mental sphere is then abstractum, and then in the gradum sphere, you have urbanum or urbanum as the localization of the social sphere, and then you have misericordum or misericordia as the reflection of the mental sphere in the social sphere. And then you have libidinum as its contrast, as a reflection of the vital energy in the social sphere. And then at the very bottom, in the morum sphere, or the vital desensitized sphere, you have exidium as the localization, and then you have corpus as the reflection of the social sphere in the vital sphere, and then meritum, which is the reflection of the mental sphere in the morum sphere.
Yeah. So does anyone want to try to describe one of these energy types? Like just pick one and give your impressions. Perhaps each of you could give try to describe one of these. Should we begin with Bolelo?
Yes. Okay. I'll describe a libidinum. Crazy, impatient. The people who get very obsessed with things, like always needy, can be very materialistic. On the one hand, they can be very easygoing, naive, playful, and fun people. That's libidinums.
Yeah, okay. Anyone else want to describe one? Christian.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Malelo, did you want to say something?
Yeah. You want to go ahead?
Oh, no. I thought you were going to say something about libidinum.
No.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay. Well, I guess I could try describing misericordum a bit. So I guess if I try to describe misericordum, it's a little bit of like I think of it as like extreme anxiousness, like super. But of course, I don't know. It's hard for me to describe these because of configurations. It kind of makes. So I think of like, what's the essence of these things? But I think of it as like a really bad anxiousness, like a worriness, especially about what others are thinking about them, how they fit in with other people. But I would say it depends on what they're interested in. It depends on things they like. But basically fear of judgment, I think, and of sort of just I would say empathy, like very compassionate, caring of others, wanting to help others, but also anxiousness and worriness about what other people think of them, and sort of like worry if they fit in or not, kind of. But depending on what they're drawn towards, I think.
I would add like sensitivity as the main thing that things revolve around, and also that they can be a bit idealistic. I think it's important to mention, or like they tend to care a bit more than, for example, if we contrast it with an energy like abstractum, for example, because they can resemble abstractum, but they tend to be a bit more, I don't know, idealistic, or they tend to care more about things, social things.
I feel like it would be the sensitivity that mainly draws them apart, because abstractum, I guess, could be a little bit more indifferent considering their environment, whereas then misericordum will sort of try to be there for other people, I think, or try to solve problems depending on the circumstance, maybe, if they can. sort of. But I don't know. That depends on configuration.
Yeah. Yeah, it is difficult to sort of get at what exactly is the main, the best way to describe like the main, what the main thing about these energies are. So did Frank or Martina want to say something about any of the others?
Yeah, I could try to describe the opposite, in my view, of misericordium, which is the most desensitized energy, excidium. They're more of a like self-centered rawness to them. They can they like to create structures outside of society, if any, tend to be patriarchal and very physical energy, and they're the like destructive lane in both ways, you can say, in this model. And like they can be anything from murderers, but they can also be more intellectual. And there you have types like Nietzsche, for example, who likes to destroy theories and stuff. I was thinking of like this is a question to you more. Did you have Karl Marx as an example of an excidium and then remove him from your site, or did you never have him?
No, I have always had him. He's still on my examples.
Okay.
But I don't have Nietzsche as an example of excidium. He was very much a good boy. Did someone say something?
No, I thought Nietzsche would be more fiducia misericordium. He seems like somebody who worries and thinks about problems.
Yeah, I put him as an abstractum, actually, because he was very much into this idea of being a hermit, and he became very sort of rebellious, but he was more of a good boy when he was young, and he definitely has excidium in his configuration, but excidium don't tend to be that intellectual, I wouldn't say. I guess I can see how people might regard Marx as an intellectual, but I don't know. I mean, Marx, this idea with, especially when they analyze the economy and things like that, there was something kind of practical about Marx, and also the way about he cared about like the common folk. It's like he was trying to speak for the workers, and with Nietzsche was more of an like an idealist and almost an elitist, in that he sort of, he was fond of these kind of hierarchies, Indian caste systems, and the Overmensch. I thought he was a magnitudinum when I first, because he had this, he seemed kind of absolutistic in some sense. I can't remember exactly. It's been a while since I sort of analyzed his characters, but I did end up thinking that he was more of a abstractum than magnitudinum. So what happened? Someone disappeared. Martina. Yeah, we'll see.
I think it's just her picture. Like she's not showing her face, but I'm not sure, because I think her mic is muted too. Yeah,
she's back.
Sorry, I had to go for a bit.
Okay, so Martina, do you want to say something about one of these energies or types, or comment in general about this before we move on to the next concept?
Well, they're so difficult for me to understand yet that I would rather keep silent for now. But yeah.
Yeah, I did write down a list of like what my key words regarding these main energies are. So I just read them. So with fiducium, I have written expansive fantasy, or expansive concepts, or expansive potentialities. And with magnitudinum, I have written grandiose or ideal-based judgment. And with abstractum, I've written thought digesting indifference. And indifference did come up when we talked about abstractum. And with misericordum, I have written highly sensitive dissatisfaction. And with urbanum, I've written conventional expertise or conventional self-mastery. And with libidinum, I've written naive, unrealistic, insatiable, limitless, and shifting expectation and hypnosis. I wasn't sure what to settle on. So there was a lot of keywords there. And with meritum, I wrote down rearing or improving, pushing, or admiring and striving. And with corpus, I've written rock solid defense or rock solid support or custom habit. And with exidium, I've written hard-hearted carelessness. So that is how I tend to think of them in kind of short keywords. But then what is an energy configuration?
Oh.
Christian.
Okay, so an energy configuration is basically someone's temperament, I think. So basically what it is then out of all those energies and out of each of the spheres, one of those energies in somebody is a primary energy, which means it takes up the most of their drive, I guess. And then then depending on which energy is the primary one, and depending on which sphere it's in, there's two secondary energies, and one energy or both the energies belong to one of each of the other spheres. So would it be all right if I gave an example? Or
Yeah, sure.
okay, so for example, you could have, for somebody's temperament or configuration, I guess, you could have someone who's fiducium primary, so that would take up most of their drive, I guess. And then the two other energies then could be one in the social sphere, so it'd be, you could have libidinum secondary, and then another energy in one of the other, or the other sphere, so you could have corpus secondary. So and the configuration would be fid, lib, and then core, and that would be their configuration. And then I know you said the primary energy, or all the energies sort of vary, but the primary energy usually takes up the most percentage, and then the two secondaries sort of support that one primary. So all the primary energies can look different, even if someone does have the same primary energy, and even if they have the same configuration. I think it probably depends on culture, and then how much percentage of that energy is impacting someone that'll probably make a big amount of the difference, I think.
Yeah.
I have noticed something that I would like you all to comment on, if you think this, if you yourself have recognized this, that in different contexts, it could be, for example, my configuration is misericordium, fiducium, or corpus, for example. And in different contexts, the secondary energies could like sort of take over. And so when I'm with my family, for example, I feel like I'm more corpus than I'm my primary energy at that moment. Yeah. And like maybe when I'm exploring stuff about the universe, I become more of a fiducium.
Okay.
So like, do you guys recognize that?
I think I do, because I'm still a little bit confused on. I think I have fiducium secondary, but then there's times where I feel like it's possible that I might have abstractum secondary, mainly because there's times where when I think, I'm usually not very exploratory. I'm not like focused on sort of like a bigger picture, I guess. I'm more, I guess I'm not very creative in that sort of way or looking for things. I'm more like focused on certain ideas or things and trying to understand them at like deeply when it comes to that kind of stuff. But then I feel like in social context, I think I understand what you mean by, because I do think I have corpus secondary for sure. I don't relate to any of the other ones that well. So when I'm like around other people, I usually tend to get anxious kind of, and especially depending on what we're talking about and what's being said, or if like a lot of people are looking at me and expecting me to say something, I usually get pretty uncomfortable and I can get anxious a bit. Like when a lot of people are looking at me at once, and by a lot, I mean like it could be 5 people in one room and they're asking me what I think, and then it's like, I don't know, it feels kind of like pressure to me. It's like, I don't like it. So I might try to avoid it or like say something like, I don't know, or something. Even though I might have something to say, I just get anxious. So, and I am a Mr. Cordum primary as well. I definitely think that's my primary energy. So.
Yeah, we kind of discussed that, and also discussed how you might be different from Frank, since you didn't really identify with everything that he said in my conversation with him when I interviewed him. But at the same time, I had asked you questions that I thought really resembled what he said, because you do bring up anxiousness as you do now.
Yes, and trouble relaxing as well. That is one thing I've found. Like it's in my back too. I feel like this. It's like knots, and they're just like sitting there all the time. And it's like no matter what I do, I can't just relieve this. Like I don't know. Like it's so weird.
Yeah, I think
it's always like I'm on alert or something.
Martina also mentioned anxiousness. You want to say something?
Yeah, exactly. Since it's a moment of reflection about anxiousness, I'm just feeling this very prevalent anxiousness right now. That's why I have to go back and come again into the call. But it's completely irrational. I can't really describe it. It's something so in my nature that it doesn't have any rational explanation whatsoever. So definitely this is the misericordia primary in me. But then sometimes I do exhibit a lot of confidence, especially in things that I'm very passionate. So that completely. So I do agree with Frank on that. But yeah, I'll give the word to somebody else now.
Yeah. Well, I agree with what you said, what you brought up here, Frank. That in certain situations, when you are perhaps more comfortable, or when you are in your or is a specific interests that sort of align with that secondary nature inside you, you can feel more like that energy.
I was also going to mention something too about the anxiousness. It also comes to ideas, I guess, as well. Like making sure I understand an idea correctly. I could get pretty anxious or fearful to speak what I actually think about an idea, or especially if it's someone that a lot of people have interpreted or tried to look at. I can get anxious about giving what I actually think and worry of whether people will, kind of like get in my face or like bring me down or something, or end up being completely wrong. Because I always want to be right. I always want to be sort of make sure I have it correct, like at the point. So that's why I think a lot, like when I make these answers and stuff, they're very like that, because it's like I want to make sure I have everything perfect, sort of. But yeah, it's like a worry of like not knowing.
Just a question in regards of what you're saying. The fact that you want to explain something thoroughly enough so everybody else can understand, is it because it's aimed to be as precise and as diligent as possible with your answer, or is it because you want others to understand you and to
It's mainly so that when I'm speaking to someone, they don't misunderstand what I'm saying. Like I want to make sure nothing's sort of unclear and that everyone because I don't like really obscurity that much. Like when people tell me things and then they don't give me anything at all afterwards. Like they'll say something is this, and then I'll be like, well, what is that? And then we'll go into more, and then I'm like, okay, well, what is that? And then, you know, people just seem to get annoyed by that. It's like, why are you doing that? And it's like, but then when I explain, it's like I really go through all of it and then I try to explain it so people actually get what I'm saying. And yeah. So, but I guess I am more focused on actually making sure people get it. And it's mainly because I want to hear what people have to say about it. And yeah. But I am afraid of like saying something wrong or not completely explaining myself and then someone misunderstanding it and then taking it in a whole different way. So I can be kind of scared of not explaining myself clearly.
Okay, should we continue with the exam?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So the next question is about integration. So what does integration mean, or how do we think of that in timeless education?
I think it has to do with becoming
Let me
less...
just say here, if my questions happen to be unclear, it is okay for you to like ask for like more. Could you be like you could ask questions to like understand the question and things like that if you need some more clues or something or what I'm after. But yeah, Frank,
Okay.
you were saying.
Spontaneously, my association went towards the like impartialness, to not be like the opposite of integration is to exclude, I think, and that comes with being partial.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's like to be integrated is to not exclude what already is in your experience.
Can you bring up
like
some?
not avoiding or
Yeah.
Yeah, non-avoidance.
But do you have any like specific example of things that we could think of integrating? Yeah, Bolelo.
Yeah. Well, when you spoke of integration, it reminds me of the concept in timeless education called evaluation compass. Nothing is on its own. Everything fits together like in a big puzzle. So there is no new truth, for instance. So no one find it. Everything, truth would fit into truth that there is already. So evaluation is about that everything fits into each other. And when they don't fit, when things don't fit, then you can start asking yourself, is this correct? Why is it in contradiction to what I already know? So that's how I take it.
Yeah. Like I was saying, some examples of things to integrate. I'm thinking mainly, well, you can ask about that if the question is unclear.
Okay. Integration.
Yeah, Christian.
Yeah, I was mainly going to mention, because I've heard of you talk about it before, what you mean by integration. And it's mainly of like the different parts of the human being. So usually we're partial towards one of these things, like and it's usually by natural attunement. So if you're naturally emotional, you're probably going to be more partial towards your emotions than you are towards the other parts of yourself, I guess. So I think of integration as then, which impartiality helps with, is sort of like getting to experience all those parts of you. Like, oh, I didn't know I felt like this in these situations, or I didn't know that. Maybe you'll start to contemplate a little bit more, I think, or things will start to bring out your curiosity, or even being more desensitized. Like if you're really emotional, afraid of what other people think. Dang.
Martina.
Maybe it is connected to the maybe it is connected to linking the timeless principles with the self-knowledge work. That's the integration part.
Yeah, that's one form of integration. Yeah, so like you mentioned, and as Christian mentioned about the things within the components within the mind, like like integrating thoughts, emotions, and the vital sphere, and also the mind and the body, so that we are not just stuck in our heads all the time, that we feel in contact with our bodies and with our experience. So that kind of integration, and also integration between like this configuration, our main energies in energy bias psychology, and also within culture, like you need to have a kind of integration within culture so that everyone are like, the ideas has to be consistent.
Yeah.
And let's see if I had anything else. Yeah, there was one more that is a bit political, like integration, like between power, the population, and the individual. But we can get more into that later with one of the later concepts. Yeah. So the next concept is about the steps of development. What are the 8 steps of development in timeless education? Does anyone want to describe the first step briefly, or however in depth you'd like? If anyone remember what I think of as like in general as a first step on the path to development or the path to spirituality. It is related to consciousness level 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bolelo.
Yeah, I'd say the first step is questioning.
Yeah. Questioning and
question.
self-questioning. Let's see here. Yeah, the need for increased receptivity and interest in essentialness. And there is also another component that I perhaps haven't emphasized much, but in order to like start on this path, one also needs free time. You know, if you are a slave or something, or you are in an environment that doesn't allow this, it can also add an additional difficulties to begin this process. That's why I think that is, you know, the tendency in society to have everyone work all the time.
Yeah.
Like people don't appreciate free time enough. And so the second step, anyone want to guess the second step or recalls?
I think it had to do something with like searching for wisdom and like experiment. Maybe this is a later step, so you can.
No. It's that step.
Yeah.
Finding the right guidance, I call it.
Yeah.
And there's not much to say about that step. I have written like what's necessary is like a combination of the individual's interests. They need to be interested in order to be like receptive, and that comes from the first step. And they have to, you know, they're going to seek things, and then that's where the teacher's competence comes in. You know, if you want people to find you, like if people want people to become developed, they need to have like like road signs, set up road signs that are like competent so that people can find them and easily evaluate them and things like that.
But is there also a risk involved in this step that you might like, because you start to experiment with like unconventional groups and views and like stuff?
Yeah, you can like end up in a cult or something if there isn't any wise, easily available guide, then you might seek and dig until you like end up in trouble, perhaps.
That's where I think probably critical thinking becomes like a huge part. That's why I kind of wonder why a lot of people actually don't learn critical thinking even as like younger children.
I guess it's because society doesn't really want people to be critical, and then they don't learn to be critical, and then they might end up, they may not follow, perhaps they don't follow society as society want, but because they lack this critical, they have it's easier for them to fall into weird cults and things like that.
I feel like that's what happened to me at one point until I started to think. I was like, wait, this, then I really wanted to learn that. But yeah, I don't know why. That's weird.
So anyone want to guess the third step?
What is it?
The third step was kind of vague. I wasn't entirely satisfied with it, but
was it? I think I know. Was it practicing the?
What did you say, Bolilo?
Yeah,
I would say increasing knowledge, something.
No, it was more like I called it theory and philosophy.
Yeah.
But basically what it is about, because it can be confused with like the fifth step, which I think is theory and philosophy proper. But it's like you need to focus, you need to have first like your situation need to be stable, like so that you have time to devote to this. So I call it situational stabilization. And like a focus on like why you are really doing this and what the situation is, like what it is you need to learn. Just like the basic, it's theory and philosophy, but it's the basics of it. And yeah, I've written seekers or student learns about the basic situation that they lack understanding, that there is in general lack of understanding in the world and lack of self-control. Like there's not enough love or self-love in themselves and in others.
Well, couldn't that be connected to level 1 then?
Level 1, the highest level?
No. Sorry. In the steps of development, step 1, I should say. Couldn't you connect step 3 with step? Because they sound a little bit similar.
Yeah. It's well. Yeah, they might figure something like that out, and that's how they find the right guide, and then like it like reaffirms, like, yeah, this is what I felt, so it fits with what I felt I needed to know in the first step, and that's how they really know they're on the right track. So yeah, they are like connected. They are all connected, these steps, in some ways. So, and that's why it can also be difficult to have them in a specific order and things like that as well. But yeah, it is.
I think of it as even as distinguished categories, like because I feel like if they are all connected, how do you then what about them is actually different from the rest of them, sort of?
Yeah, I mean, it is a little bit artificial. It's to have something to present, to give people so they can confirm if they recognize this in themselves when they try to develop themselves and things like that. So yeah, I know that you shouldn't take these things like too dogmatically. But it's like a way to try to remember, a system of memorization for things that can be good to teach others. Even if you have developed yourself, you might forget like every step you went through or everything that you have like thought about when you then try to help others, for example. So then what is the fourth step, Christian?
I'm pretty sure that's where you start to become more aware of your tendencies. And if you have received the right knowledge, I guess this would be working with the higher part, or the inner knower. This would be working with non-attached awareness. So you become more aware of your tendencies, become more aware of like emotional reactivity and what you're biased towards, and your thoughts and ideas, what you think about things. Well, I mean, that could be connected with level 1, or step 1, but this time I think you're sort of getting more into it, like you're getting more in depth and really sort of sorting things out, and how other people see you and how you come across towards others, and becoming just, I think of it as becoming more aware of yourself and maybe of other people around you, and sort of what's going on around you, I think.
Yeah, it's the beginning of self-knowledge. I have written, it's like the first practice, the practice of self-awareness, I called it. Detached observation, separate nature from acquisition or imitation, recall one's own personal experiences, practice to go against habits, to get in contact with your experience, to expose the conflict between the self and the idealized self, and so on.
Yeah.
So that's how I summarized it here. But then comes step 5.
That's pretty good.
Anyone can recall?
You already gave step 5 from step 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, just more
Yeah,
practice,
it is.
I think, of the concepts. I think it is.
Yeah, it's the theory and philosophy. Study laws of reality, I call this. Or like the contents of timeless education in this case.
Right.
Yeah, so there's not much we need to say about that. It's like what we are doing now can be considered step 5.
Yeah. What I've been doing for the past like year now.
Yeah. And then step 6, the next step.
Yeah, this is where it gets sort of 6th step.
Step 6.
I can't remember.
Did it have anything to do with like emotion, like to integrate emotions?
Yeah, it's related to emotion. Bolelo.
Yeah. Okay. Step 6, I would say it's then when you.
Oh, he disappeared.
No.
Sorry. Okay, I'm saying step 6 is when you become when you speak your truth. I mean, you don't you speak. You are honest. How you feel what you speak what you feel. It's when you start to practice that. That's now step 6.
Yeah, I combined practicing working with both emotions and authenticity because I felt that it works better if you like work on those two at the same time sometimes. So I call it practice of will or attitude. Create new attitudes to help with emotional reactivity and things like that. And try to resist. And this the previous practices will of course help you in this. Like once your worldview have changed a bit, and you perhaps have become more aware of what's essential, then obviously it will be easier to control your emotions or not get lost in them and things like that. And there are different emotions. There are more legitimate emotions, and then there are emotions that are like manufactured by the culture.
Well, I feel like at times I've even seen people like that they're not heavily influenced by the culture, but even I don't know. I wonder if it's possible to actually create your own manufactured emotions depending on like how you feel other people are treating you. Like you could have this idea about who you think you are, or like an idea about it, and then like I think of it usually as a victim kind of thing, where like if you're a victim, you can create this idea you're a victim, and then if you view people a certain way, and then when they say certain things that may draw out certain emotions that sort of may not be there.
But it's often manufactured emotions are often emotions based on ideas that either you come up with yourself or that has been put into you. While real emotions are things that if someone actually hits you or if you have really been abused, and those are more difficult to control and so on. So those are
definitely.
Would you say that phobias is like because I was curious if these fake emotions like I consider them as like either you're like motivated to something that you don't really like, you wouldn't care about if it wasn't for your conditioning, and like you become very like you really want this thing and then you get all emotional about not getting it, and like but also like I was thinking maybe phobias, like would you see that is also kind of fake emotionality when you have like focused your like maybe you have fear in yourself and then you like focus it on oh I'm afraid of spiders to easily to more easily manage the fear when you have localized it and gotten a sense
Well,
of
and I would say that there are natural fears, and we can even include misericordem energy into this. Like it is, as I describe it, sometimes as an anxious or sensitive energy. It's it's natural, but you can still control or like detach from that which is natural. So it's like you don't always have to change things about yourself. The most important thing is to be aware of things so that you don't get lost in it, and so that you can.
I just want to check the dog barking outside.
Yeah.
1
okay.
minute.
Well, I think of it as sometimes like if something does motivate you to do things, I guess a phobia can be a motivator. Like if you don't want spiders in your house, you might build a good house that keeps them out or something.
Yeah.
So I guess that like fear, as long as you are aware of it, like, I know it is silly to be afraid of ordinary spiders that are not poisonous or whatever, but because it motivates me and because I am detached from it, and it's like you're using what might otherwise be a negative energy, you're using it in a productive way. So in that sense, there are many different ways to work with emotions, but and that the most important thing is like the attitude or the awareness of things. That's why consciousness is so important.
Okay, I understand.
And then we come to step 7.
I remember. I think I remember this
Christian.
one. I think this is where you talk about self-awareness, like increasing self-awareness.
Increasing awareness in general.
Yeah. So basically what we've been talking about, sort of.
Yeah. Well, there are some. You move away from simply focusing on yourself.
Yeah, you become more
remember?
aware. I think you become more aware of actually society and other people, sort of at like a more. I don't know. I feel like I haven't looked too much into those higher steps because I feel like I'm not really there myself yet. So
you start to consider where you are in like a context to others and to reality, and how you are going to, because you can help yourself, but then you notice as you start to engage with the world again, that other people, you will see how difficult it can be to maintain this like self-control and higher step, and even to remember what you have learned when you encounter people who are not developed and who will provoke you. And then also you will how to deal with people and how to like spread, like teach this to others without overtly teaching them. You can't start preaching, but you will have to know how to like be smart about things and wise about things, and also how to like consider how to preserve the teaching, and so that it doesn't get lost and things like that, which leads us to the last step, which was formulation and preservation. You can almost combine those 2 steps, but I think it's useful to like separate and have like 8 steps. And formulation and preservation, also learning from trying to formulate and preserve a teaching. You can learn from that as well. How should you look at things, and you can learn from trying to like construct your own teaching.
Yeah, I'm sort of trying to do that, like reformulate some of the stuff in my own experience and kind of, because I feel like it actually does sort of like force you to be paying attention and trying to figure things out. So I feel like it does definitely induce consciousness and awareness, and which is helpful. But one thing I found when it comes to other people encountering you is that if you, I feel like the best way to go about it is to, when other people sort of try to encounter you and tell you what they think about the world or about you or about other people, it's way better to have like timeless education as your grounding, but then be able to question them from that grounding, sort of, rather than like pushing others to accept your beliefs and adopt your beliefs. Like it's way better to question what they think they know or believe, and then kind of get there, and then maybe over time they'll ask you what you think or like what you believe or something, and then you can tell them.
Yeah, that has been my experience as well.
Yeah, especially with people, ordinary people, because I do work at a gas station, so I get a lot of people that come in and ask me about things. They'll ask me about politics or something. Like, oh, are you paying attention to this or looking at this? And what do you think about this and that? And then they'll tell me what they think, and then I'll go into that. And then it's actually kind of fun. But yeah, I think it's way better to just wait until people start to question you and then go from there.
Yeah. So the next concept is the attitudinal practices, which are related to these steps of development. So I brought up that there are 3 general ways when it comes to practicing consciousness, or what people mainly call meditation. So can you, someone briefly describe what these 3 general ways or paths are?
One of them was like one of them was like constructed artificial spirituality or something like that. I remember, where you like artificially follow a set of
like a system, like a
like you eat a rice corn a day or something. I don't know. To like
no, it's like I think of it as like a philosophy. Like when people follow a philosophy or like a religion or something, that's sort of like their system, and they can choose to follow that and act in ideal ways, sort of, that produce specific insights or something.
Yeah, it's using imitation or like conformity to your advantage. Like you try to follow a model of behavior or a model of thought, someone's philosophy, like you brought up, or simply following like a routine in a physical way, sort of. But there are 2 other methods or approaches. Yeah, Christian.
Wait, does anyone else want to say? Because I'll say both of them. Okay.
Go ahead.
So the opposite then of the constructed ideal is then the naturalness, just following your own sort of natural drives and coming up with results on your own, I guess. And then the one that balances them, that's in the middle, is just non-attached awareness. I think it's just consciousness. But then you said it was better to have them, all 3 of them, balanced. So timeless, and the way I've actually figured, like, when because I follow timeless education sort of in the model kind of way, like you routinely practice it and follow it. But I feel like that itself induces naturalness and to be yourself and sort of explore things on your own while combining non-attached awareness at the same time. So I feel like timeless education sort of has all 3 of those things in one, sort of.
Yeah, because just following each can lead to like a problem.
Yeah.
Do you recall what those problems might be with each step?
I think with the constructed one, it was I think the thing could be that the philosophy is wrong, or that it could produce. I think of it as like bad fruits. Like when you talk about producing good fruits and bad fruits and stuff like that, I think of if you follow some type of teaching or religion, it could produce negative consequences. Whereas then if you follow your own nature, you might get stuck in something in what you believe, or you might veer off a bit from what's true or something like that. And then just I don't know if there was any negative effects when it came to non-attached awareness, except for only I can only think of the beginning when we talked about how non-attached awareness, if you think there really is nothing but awareness and there's no point to really understanding anything else except for sticking to only awareness or something, but I can't remember.
Yeah, it's basically you don't know what to do.
Yeah.
But
I feel like having awareness of your natural energies gives you that drive, sort of, that you know what you're doing by following your own nature, so to speak. Like that.
I will just clarify a bit that if you imitate a model, there is a risk of like repression, that you might repress authenticity. And if you are only focused on authenticity and following your desires, it's possible that things that are actually not natural or that are a bit pathological you might confuse that with naturalness, like you are entitled to scream out
Like
all kinds of negative emotions that might be like superficial or like not productive. Like
I think
no.
My bad. I think this is what you mean when you say when the energy sort of try to idealize their own partialness as like everyone's natural energy.
So that was and I refer to them as attitudinal practices, but basically, it is what I consider to be meditation. I have derived this from various meditation practices. It's like it seems that most, if not all, meditation practices ultimately fit one of these three paths. I feel it's kind of like a synthesis. And then let's see here. Sometimes people with spirituality criticize the creation of models and systems, or even having a teaching, as creating a distorted perception of reality. But what is the benefit? What is the benefit of models and systems or a teaching?
Well, it's mainly as a guide, I think, to sort of help you when, you have other people telling you how things are or something. You have sort of something that can guide you, I guess, but it has to be
like clues.
Like a common phrase in spirituality is like the map is not the territory, and while that's true, that doesn't mean that you should throw away
the map. Is not helpful, or it's
like,
not.
Okay, then I should not look at the map. Then you don't know where you're going.
Yeah.
And one more thing that I haven't seen other people bring up in regards to that is that it also supports one's own memory. It can help with memory, because even when you develop yourself, you might actually forget. Like I brought up previously in this conversation, that you might forget all the steps you went through, and by having things written down, it can help you remember, like a support for the memory. Because the memory is, unfortunately, the memory is not timeless. Not like the consciousness. It's like
it's something that's perceived, like something that you sort of know you're having like a memory of something, It's like, you can explain that memory and you can analyze it and share it even. Well, not to say that you can't share unattached awareness, but it's different.
You can always degenerate to the lower sphere of consciousness if you forget and don't pick it up again.
So it's like an important partner with consciousness. That's why I associate like
frozen. Is everybody frozen or what?
No, perhaps on your end, but on my end, no one is frozen.
Yeah, same here.
Are we frozen, Bolero?
The recording is frozen on my side.
Okay, but I think it will. I think we will be animated on the recording, so we'll keep going.
Yeah, if it's coming from yours. Yeah. I think if it's
but
coming
as long as you can hear us, it's okay to keep going. Right. Okay. Yeah. So in regards to this, like I was talking about, like that's why I associate like the memory with like the feminine and consciousness with the masculine. And I do believe that's what religion meant by like men and women in the Bible, for example, that it's very much associated with memory, which is associated with knowledge, like whether it be knowledge in a book or in a covenant or church or within your own mind. Like it's the most important partner to consciousness, but still it still belongs more to the temporal than the timeless, so to speak. But related to this idea of like models and systems and trying to remember is the analogical method. What is the analogical method, and why does it often work?
Oh man. Can I say something about that?
Yeah, sure.
I've had the hardest time actually understanding the analogical method. It's been because I don't know, like and you mentioned analogy as correspondence, right? So it's like if you see this at one stage, you can see this at another stage, and that helps to increase knowledge sort of I guess what's really true or out there. But I've had a hard time actually sort of trying to find a way to actually do that. But even with, but I think I've been able to sort of see it with ideas, like how you can connect this idea with another idea and another idea and get them. But no, I can't. I have no idea.
Yeah, it's difficult to. It's kind of a simple principle, and it's difficult to make it into kind of a system or something that you can follow very precisely. But it's a bit intuitive, I guess. But because everything is connected and founded on recurrence and reflections and correspondences, like it's a fundamental law. If everything resembles each other at their core, then there should also be like an analogy or something. Like if you go deep enough into anything, then it will resemble another thing if you go deep enough into it. So like, yeah, I brought up, for example, this example with, what was it? Like health and something else. I can't. Ethics and health. Like if you go deep enough into ethics and go deep enough into health, you can see that what is health without ethics and what is ethics without health, sort of like that. And things resemble a sort of interconnection and also useful for memorization and integration of a system. But let's take an example then here, because it's easier to remember things if you can draw like connections between them. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say about how, like, well, sometimes I try to look out into the world and see if I can find that, and I kind of find it cool how everything sort of seems to have like a foundation, like everything seems to have a base or like a core, like everything does, like everything's standing on something or is holding it together, I guess. Like everything has a foundation, kind of, or base. Yeah, a core, like a base element, but then how they're constructed.
Yeah, I think it's more useful to think of it in the realm of ideas and like in metaphysics rather than like the physics. I'm not sure you can. I think it works because people have discovered this idea with fractals, that there is patterns like that in nature as well. But I'm not really all that interested in that. But I think more of in like ideas, and like I brought up the example with ethics and health. Martina.
I remember you mentioned that in one of the articles with culture and nature, was it? With those two concepts, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, there's an analogy or correspondence. Did you want to say something more about that?
No. I just wanted to posit it as an example if you needed one.
It is an example because on the one hand, culture, I often talk about culture as being separate from nature. But at the same time, where does culture come from? It must come from human beings, and in that sense be related to our nature. And that's why I draw a kind of correspondence between certain energy patterns and certain like cultural manifestations.
Yeah.
Right?
And you can even like take concepts as like economy, like economy and well, nature too, I guess. And because like a transaction and like it should work on as soon as it is a theoretical field, you should be able to, like, if this principle is true, then it should work regardless of what field you choose, right?
Yeah. But yeah, Bolilo.
Yeah, I always think of the analogical method more like a mathematical, maybe theory. Y is ax squared plus bx plus c. That holds true throughout. And then you would say that that equation holds true even with different values, even if you put in different values, but then you still have the same basic equation. That's how I think of it.
Yeah.
At the base, we have this, that is not changing. Whatever values are in there can either be referring to a cow or a cat, but then it still holds true.
Christian.
I was also thinking about the examples you've actually brought up in the past about, for example, gravity and electromagnetism and mind, matter, and life. How you can see an analogy between all those, sort of. How gravity may work in the same way that electromagnetism does, and in the same way that mind and light or mind and matter work, sort of, and how you can view the same, I guess, like what Malala was saying, the formula, you can sort of see it on multiple different levels or scales.
Yeah,
A phenomenon.
That's what my next kind of question relates to. The formula alpha, omega, chi, omega does not only represent timeless principles. I often talk about them as representing like the 4 basic timeless principles, but through synthesis and analogy, they also represent fundamental psychology. So anyone can explain or how they are also representative of like the levels in fundamental psychology. Yeah, Christian.
Okay, so when you're talking about the fundamental levels, are you just saying the formula? Like, do you mean how it corresponds with the elements, or do you mean how it relates to the biopsychology model, or the formula, I guess, how it relates to them?
Yeah, how the 5 parts of the human being are expressed in the formula, or how they are how the formula kind of stand in for them.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, alpha and omega would be the contrast. So then you have fire and water, and that would be mental, fantastical, like I think of it as thoughts and ideas, which is then contrasted with physical sensation, desensitized energy, sort of. Whereas then the mediator, or it would be like air or chi, that would be like the emotional energy, just sort of caught in between them. Then for the second omega, that would be like for I think it just corresponds to the physical body being, yeah, and then because it's the most solid, it's the closest to the physical earth, even though it's not the most solid, but you know what I mean, like it's the most attached to the physical, I guess. And then whereas everything else is more like degrees that become more and more invisible, I guess. And then consciousness would be associated with like ether, that would be like which is associated with the alpha omega chi, and this is how you get the seven principles and stuff like that, or the 7 levels. And but yeah, ether.
The formula has kind of like the 3-partite principle and a 4-partite principle combined, sort of. And the triad, like the sacred triad, represents consciousness.
Yeah. That's where I think you associate with ether and the 5 elements, or like the 5th element.
Because you cannot, I used to kind of contemplate for a long time whether fire actually represented intellect or if it represented consciousness. And so that like it was only psychology, like the physical body was not included, like you move everything up 1 step. But that didn't work. I used the analogy, looked over, like there is no, like since all the elements are like manifest phenomena, and consciousness is like space, it's like nothing, or ether. Ether is also
like emptiness, kind of.
Yeah, it's like ether is nothing to the extent that we think of nothing, even though there may not actually be nothing. There is always something, and that is like, then we name it ether or something like that if we use ancient language. I use a different term for it, which I will get to if we have the time. Well, I think we can go for 2 hours, even if Frank, I think, will perhaps be leaving. He needs to go or something. So let's speed things up a little bit here. One way analogy is useful is through what I call organizational numbers, where each number corresponds to either a principle, a concept, or a system. Anyone wants to comment how a number between 1 and 12 corresponds to a principle, concept, or system in timeless education? I will ask Frank before he leaves.
Okay, sure. This is the part of timeless education that I understand the least, and I've done over, like, I don't think I can give a good answer to this question.
Yeah, well, it's mainly like a system of memorization. It's easy to remember the concepts if you associate them with a number, but you haven't really thought of that. Or
Like, think of
no,
it as like
I
a
thought you were
summary.
talking, because you have a part where you're talking about magical numbers and stuff, which
no, no. It's got nothing to do with that. I
Okay.
mean, they're not it's not magical numbers. It's basically that each number from 1 to 9 like express an aspect of the universe, and that's like the origin of the number system. But here I just want to know in terms of like memorization, like corresponding a concept in timeless education with one of the numbers between 1 and 12.
No, I don't have a good answer to that either, but yeah.
Well, as an example, the number 5 is associated with fundamental psychology. Do you know why? Because there are 5 levels to the human being.
Okay.
So then what then might the number 6 correspond to?
There is no number. Okay. So the system is like, so there are 6 levels of something else.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I understand the system, but I don't.
Well, you know what the 7 correspond to?
Yeah, consciousness levels.
Yeah, levels of consciousness. But you don't know what 6 is related
No,
to.
I haven't actually applied this method of memorization.
Yeah. Well, Christian, you know what the 6 relates to?
Yeah, that's the dimensions of self-knowledge. So
Yeah. Timeless man, temporary man, natural man, biological man, masked man, and unfree man. Yeah, right. What about the number 4? The number 4 is easy.
Yeah.
The formula.
Alpha, omega.
Wait, who? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, the formula, alpha, omega, chi, omega. That's 4 principles.
Okay.
Yeah, I added 8. I didn't make a video about organizational numbers, but I didn't have one for 8. But since then, I have like the 8 steps of development.
Yeah.
And of course, 9. I mean, 9. You know what 9 corresponds to? The bias psychology. But 12.
Oh.
Christian.
Yeah, that's the wandering shapes. That's mythology.
And we already talked about that in the last part. Yeah, so I don't know if we have and the number 1, 2, and 3 are like correspond to the principles in the formula. It's like the formula corresponds to both 1, 2, 3, and 4. Yeah, so that, and then 5, 6, 7, and 8, the steps of 9 and 12. I don't really have one for 10 and 11.
Yeah, I've actually been thinking about if it's possible to even add more numbers. Like, I've been looking around and seeing, well, is there any concepts in here that have like 10 things that we can place at number 10 or something? I haven't found anything, I don't think. But number 8, when I saw the steps of development, I was like, oh, you could probably add 8 there as an organizational number.
Yeah, and that's why I thought that's why I wanted to have 8 steps, so I could like include that.
Oh, maybe that's why you create the 5th step. Maybe that's why the 5th step is so similar to the 3rd one.
That's part of it. And the next question is about interpretation of religions. This isn't exactly a concept, but it's something that can be kind of useful and important. So about the interpretation of religions in timeless education, what is the basic theory or interpretation of religions in timeless education using the analogical method? All right, Christian.
I think the basis of it is the formula. Like all the religions, what religion's supposed to sort of be is down to consciousness. So it's mainly about the wandering shapes, sort of, and the right knowledge, I think. And then also the main formula or the strong foundation for your mind, I guess. So the core, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, I was mainly looking for like what are these symbols? What do they represent?
Which symbols? You mean the
in religions, in mythology?
Oh, like you mean like the analogies, like light corresponds with this, or
yeah, I mean in general. I mean they are not literal. They are what?
symbols, or like meant to be
Yeah.
interpreted.
Are you talking maybe
as an
about?
metaphor.
No, Andres, are you talking about, for instance, Heraclitus logos with the alpha, omega, shi, omega?
Yeah, well, what I'm looking for is that the answer I was looking for is that the interpretation of religions is that they are psychological.
Yeah.
Oh.
But the answer you gave actually answers a question I had further down, so we can perhaps skip that later. But yeah, of course, the formula, this basic foundation is related. But let me then ask a more specific question. What do birds represent in ancient religions and mythology? Martina.
Well, I would say that it's assimilated to the sapientium type, so I suppose the intellect.
Yeah,
Then
thoughts and ideas. But my next question is then, why do birds represent thoughts and ideas? How can we know this? Christian. Or Frank.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I give Frank the question before he leaves.
I'm just gonna guess, and I'm gonna leave after this question. But my guess is that they're like ungrounded and that they're like moving fast and they're like thoughts are like that.
Yeah, Christian.
Well, Frank, I would say cheetahs move pretty fast on the ground. So I don't know if a cheetah could outrun a bird.
Yeah, but they're like they're in the air. They're like
Yes.
No, my bad. My bad.
They are the least grounded animal. Or
they're the closest to the. If you think of the levels, sort of like when the planets sort of are associated with different levels of consciousness, the birds are the closest to that higher planet, or closer to the stars, the planets and stuff, because they're in the sky. So they're closer to the higher principles, I guess, so to speak. Whereas then the animals and marine creatures are sort of closer to the ground and can't get really that far into the higher principles. So, which is why then thought energies, it's easier for them to grasp the higher principles, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
I said I had written analogy with the element fire in the sky, and that they are sort of the lightest animals in the sense that they can fly, and things like the symbol for the Holy Spirit is often portrayed as a dove and things like that. And of course, Socrates he talks about birds and this that you sort of alluded to, Christian. So there are these are like the clues which we can arrive at the conclusion that birds probably do represent. We can be fairly sure that they represent thoughts and things associated with the intellect.
Yeah.
In case someone answers you like, how do you know that? How do you know that birds are thoughts? Well, then I would use these arguments.
Yeah, if you think about it sort of logically, I think it would be easier. And if you could actually correlate it to,
Right.
I found it very difficult to interpret some of those texts, though. Like really hard to really get what the heck they're meaning by them. It's like, because I read the Phaedo again, not even like a couple weeks ago, and geez, I have no idea what he's talking about. Like, I tried.
I also got tired of Socrates and Plato.
Yeah, I tried drawing. I even tried drawing my own model of what he was talking about, and I couldn't follow it. I was like, "What is he?" Just getting so confused. So
there's so much stuff. So much stuff they bring up.
It's so obscure. It's like, like what? So what do you mean? This makes no sense. The Earth doesn't look like this. There's no rivers that flow through here and go through here. So I guess that's how you could see it as psychological. But even when it's supposed to represent psychology, it's like, well, what are they still talking about? It's hard. How the heck did they come up with this stuff? They apparently got it from the poets, though. So that's why I want to read Homer and the Odyssey and stuff, because maybe that will help me understand what the hell they're talking about.
Yeah, and we talked about the planets. What do the 7 planets represent in ancient systems? Christian.
Just the levels of consciousness.
Yeah, and as I asked with the birds, why do the 7 planets represents the levels of consciousness? Like, what are the implications or clues to that?
I think it's when you're looking at the zodiac, because you can see each planet correlates with one of the characters in mythology and one of the gods, I guess, which also correlates with the level of consciousness. So, but I don't know. I guess I don't know how it correlates with the birds. I guess the planets.
Martina.
Well, I'm purely speculating here, but I bought this book about alchemy and mysticism, and they have a lot of these pictures where they, especially in the microcosmos or the macrocosmos, they represent these planets and these maps, no? And it's obviously just very simplistically depicted in some of them, where's the sun in the middle, and then there's circles of awareness. And so I suppose that it's just a very, again, analogical way of describing the paths to, it's just examples of how to reach a certain level of.
Yeah, it's when you look at all of these ancient systems and you look at what various 7 type systems or 7 types 7 symbols represent, and then you get these clues. So, for example, you can also look at the 7 heavens or the 7 churches in the Bible. When they describe the 7 churches, it's clear that they are speaking of certain churches are closer to divinity than others. So it's like levels in some sense, and also, like you said, the qualities of gods associated with them in the zodiac, and yeah, things like that. And they mean wandering lights. It's like the lights that move in the sky, and so they, when the sun comes, there is bright, and brightness is like consciousness. That's like the period of when a person understands, and when there is no sun, and when there is only like the most remote light that moves into the sky. That's like Saturn or Jupiter, I think. No, Saturn, I think, is the furthest level. That's like the lowest consciousness. So that's sort of how I look at it, and how I would explain it if someone like probed me or interrogated me over why I think they represent levels of consciousness. And I often think like that, if I need to be able to explain this if someone like asks me, or if someone is skeptical. So that's something I always sort of take into consideration.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see here.
Andreas?
Yeah.
Sorry, Christian?
I was just going to mention something about the solar eclipse, because I've heard things about eclipses and stuff using symbolism, like when the moon covers the sun during an eclipse. I've seen some mythological stories sort of use that, like, don't look at the sun when there's an eclipse or something like that. And then when I think of light, it's like maybe it's sort of like how the moon can be like a false light because it appears like it shows light, but it doesn't. Then maybe the solar eclipse is sort of like that. Like, it appears to be light, but it's not light. It's dark or something. But I just wanted to mention that. That's all.
Oh, okay.
And I just wanted to say that, well, to ask you, Andreas, why does someone need to defend the fact that we're using things from the natural environment, which is what people since the beginning have been using to explain the inner and the outer world? Why is it important to defend these examples, since it's the most natural thing to do, isn't it? Just to use the world that's around us, be it with planets, be it with animals, with
Yeah. Well, it's I guess people who are used to taking their religion seriously or literally, they might be so unused to that quite simple and logical idea that they need to hear some reasoning. I don't know. Now, I have not really had that much debate with people about these things. I haven't had that much resistance in that sense. But I do like being able to be prepared because you never know what kind of person you might encounter. And also, yeah, I think it's Christian.
Well, even when you look out in, like, if you watch a video or like you even notice people around you in your surroundings, they may start to speak about religious things and they talk about it literally. And for example, my family, some of my family members are very religious, and when they talk about religion, they speak about it literally, and sometimes the stuff they says doesn't make sense to me. So or I'll see like hypocrisy in some of the stuff they say. So it's sort of helpful to, like, where was the Bible really meant to be taken literally? Like, I even thought about that when I was younger, like, because some of it doesn't make, I don't think, that much sense. So if you take it literally, I don't think. So how could it be useful then, sort of? I think of it like, but you could sort of, I think you can prepare yourself for those kinds of conversations by paying it, like seeing how people talk about religious matters, or even when you watch like a YouTube video and someone's debating another person about religion, what are the like common things that pop up that they argue about, and what are the common points they make or something. But yeah, I just want to say that.
Yeah. Okay. So let's. Oh yeah. I sometimes mention that myths and religious stories had a security measure in place. Yeah. What do I mean by this? Bolelo.
Okay, you said the security measure, for instance, would be to exaggerate things. You'll find that in the scripture, for instance, they will tell a story, but the story will be so exaggerated that when you read it, you can really see that this can't really be can't be literal, one. And secondly, it said it was also to prevent future deterioration, or that if somebody wanted to spoil it, that they can't do that. Those are the security measures.
Yeah. Yeah, that's basically it. That if as long as you take it psychologically, then it's more difficult to distort it in a way that becomes problematic.
That's pretty smart, like, especially in ancient times, to think like that. Like, holy crap, honey. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I assume that's why that it was the security measure. It's like my interpretation. Like, I think they might have been thinking like that, but I can't be sure either. But yeah, it was smart if they really thought like that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I'm like, wow, if that's true,
Yeah.
dang. Prevent other.
And my next question you already answered, sort of, Christian, but I was going to ask, what did religions originally search for, and later on to preserve? What were really religions about, apart from being an ancient form of psychology? And you kind of touched on that.
If I wanted to say anything, I think it would be the core of themselves, like who they really are, and then the basic fundamental. I remember Malelo mentioning this in the last exam in the beginning, but like when he was explaining what timeless education is, he talks about it was just the four, the governing principle of the entire universe, or the governing principles. I feel like that's what they were searching for, is like the core of the universe, like what gives rise to existence and phenomena, like what's its basic formula, so to speak.
Something reliable, something that is always true in all eras.
Timeless. Something
like the search for ultimate reality, that which you can rely on. And then we come to some obscure concepts last here that I haven't really talked about that much, but I think you have at least heard me talk about dark hyperdensity regions. That is like my concept for ether that we touched on before. But what is the basic idea of dark hyperdensity regions in timeless education? Christian?
I think the basics of it was that it's like, I think this is why you brought up non-dualism and the obscurity of it, but it's basically like everything derives from the same type of substance. And I think what you think it is just velocity, like it's just speed moving really fast at different degrees. So then all phenomena is like speed at different degrees. So then dark energy would be analogous with this like hypermotion. It's like the reason why we can't see it or why it may move faster than the speed of light is because it moves faster than light, or moves faster than matter. So then that's why, and that would be like the cause of gravity and why space appears to be empty. Like there's nothing.
Yeah.
I think that's like the base, but I could be.
Yeah, those are you connect this with really old videos that I made about gravity and this stuff about high velocity being faster than the speed of light, so that we cannot perceive it and things like that. And I did get some of those ideas from some books on physics and questions about things, but lately I haven't been thinking that much about velocity, but more in like pressure, various pressure conditions, and in like dimensions that are smaller than physical zero, so that we have like, yeah, I mean, these regions, it's like yeah, I think of it like if you draw up a model, you would have like the visible universe as like the surface of a planet, and then you have like regions within that you cannot perceive, but which are there and which becomes denser and denser. And I actually sort of divided it into 5 levels to make an analogy with the human being, based on this principle that, you know, in certain spiritual advice that some of these sages have given, is like you can know the entire universe from looking within. So I kind of drew upon that, and like this idea of what is within is the same as that which is without, and things like that. And so yeah, do you want to comment on what these levels might be?
Yeah, because I think you mentioned it in your theory of evolution, I think.
Yeah.
So the core, I remember talking to you about this a long time ago. I think the core of a planet sort of is like consciousness. It's the most dense, the most solid, the most invisible, and then probably the most permanent and lasting. And then as you go out, it gets more temporary, I guess. And so the levels where then you have like concepts and ideas, I guess that's closer to consciousness. And then you have next you have the sensitive energy, and that may be what produces sort of the life energy and gives beings their animating force. So that's where you dip into like the theory of evolution, I think, and all that. And then the fourth layer would be like the DNA and the what do you call it, the cells and the organisms that are within the body and stuff. And then on the outside, on the outmost, you have the physical world, which is what you can perceive with the naked eye. Or I mean, not like you can't, but without a microscope, I guess this is what you could see. And then as you go smaller and smaller, you find out there's more layers behind it. And,
Yeah.
Some of the layers may be hidden or can't see them, like life energy and consciousness and thoughts and ideas and that kind of stuff.
And these energies can also be referred to as like frequencies or organizational fields, or some of these other spiritual or terms that you find in modern physics, also fields.
Yeah, when I hear you talk about that stuff, I'm like, dude, I cannot follow that.
Yeah, I mean, I have a hard time follow some of these things that I like look at to get clues to this. But this is what I have been able to make sense of and organize into something that sort of fits with how I think, what makes sense when I look at the world. So if we continue with this concept with dark hyperdensity regions, then we come to eternal metamorphosis pattern, which is related to evolution. So then what does timeless education propose as the explanation for the origin of life, and related to that, the evolution of simple life forms into beings such as human beings with consciousness? Christian?
I think if I remember, it's because I've thought about this myself. I want to get into this whole evolution thing because a lot of people are huge into it. So, but I think the main idea was that the eternal metamorphosis pattern is kind of like since nature sort of works in a cyclical process, then it's possible that the universe itself has a cycle and life arises at predetermined points in the universe's cycle. So like evolution then doesn't occur through organisms like gradually becoming more and more complex, but more like there's points where they sort of transform at. So like 300,000 years pass and then boom, there's just a leap to like a whole new different life form or organism or something, and then it gets more and more complex through the universe's cycle, which is connected with the main principles in timeless education. And why I think you call it an eternal metamorphosis pattern, because it's a permanent pattern, I guess.
Yeah, it's like there exists a permanent pattern in these dark regions, and then life forms tries to adapt to this, but they are limited in what the physical world provides. And as life more and more tries to adapt to these eternal patterns, it happens through certain transformation phases or points in time and space. And so the theory also speculates that even on other planets, there will be evolution similar to that on Earth. They will follow a similar pattern that exists in like these regions. And that is also like with life then, it's not that it happens accidentally through some kind of electricity or some kind of bolt of lightning hitting some kind of primordial sea, but it's like there's always life in these invisible regions, and then that starts to creep into the physical world. And because life always comes from within, even when beings give birth to other beings, it's like a new life form comes from within. It's like the origin of life is how I tend to look at it. But I haven't made a lot of videos or articles about this, so it's like I made the few videos I've done about this is just to get it out there. Like I want to like at least say something about it, because I think you do need to like it's since we talk so much about consciousness and these life energies and how people can be divided into types, it's like I don't feel like ordinary Darwinian evolution explains types. Types shouldn't be a thing according to ordinary evolution. Everything should be just gradual, and everyone should be either the same or unique and things like that. And so
there's no complexity really. It's very like but then when you describe the natural energies, like that's why I think I agree a lot with your energy bias, because when I think about the energies and what they represent, I feel like they are sort of core to life, like the human being. Like humans wouldn't be humans without these energies, so they may be inherent parts of like the human species that makes the human species what it is. Like without these energies, you would be missing a part of humanity. Like humanity wouldn't be humanity without these 9 categories or primary energies, sort of.
Yeah, they are like different organs in the species that make up the human species.
Yeah.
And then I have one more concept. The last concept has to do with politics and the organization of society. But I don't think I have said much about my specific ideas concerning this. So I guess I will let you guess a little bit more in this. You can just throw out some guesses here. Then I will explain what I sort of had in mind here. But yeah, first I should say that I've updated the idea of triarchy to five-dimensional politics. And these are analogies to the 5 parts of the human being in fundamental psychology. My question is, my first question is, what political or societal idea or social institution might correspond to consciousness?
Wait, can you repeat that one more time?
What political or societal idea or social institution might correspond to consciousness? Consciousness in like the higher part in the components of the human psychology.
Like which one already exists, sort of?
Yeah, or does someone exist? Perhaps your answer is
Church.
yeah, religion, spiritual, like cults and things like that. Like spirituality tends to deal with consciousness. That is like
Outside education.
Yeah,
What about education?
But timeless education, yeah, it tries to cover everything, I guess, but mainly
Thought of the triarchy. Like I remember you mentioning that in political. So you have like the masculine, feminine, and the child kind of self-governance, then the guiding ideals, and then empathy and community and sort of like that.
Yeah,
so,
that comes to the next aspects. The other one is what political or societal idea or social institution might correspond to the intellect.
Okay, I get this now. Like I got it. Anything that involves knowledge, I guess. So like academia,
education. And that's where timeless education. That's what I think of timeless education, like proper. Because I forgot to mention with consciousness, I also think when it comes to political ideas, we should value the search for truth as an aspect of like consciousness. And that's what I consider to be real religion. There is this openness to search, not just dogmatism. That is like incompetent or fallen religion, but real religion is that which questions perhaps even their own religions when they are becoming stagnant. And so it's always that search for truth that is important. And with the intellect or with education, you need an essential education based on a solid foundation, and that would be something like timeless education, then you could say, or something similar to it. So it's like related to the formula, you could say. And then we have, but what about the emotions? Can you think of something, some institution or idea, Christian?
I think if I remember, you were talking about religion at one point, but I remember one time you emphasized this. You were like, "We don't even have a emotional institution."
The loony bin.
Yeah, there is no proper institution that deals with emotions or really tries to teach friendliness. But yeah, like you pointed out, I did mention that religions do sometimes try to cover that. You have Christianity,
like a duty, though. Like you have to do this so you don't be punished.
Yeah, it becomes like a duty more than to really treat emotions.
Genuine, like because then it's like you're not being kind out of your own genuine kind of wanting to be. It's like because fear of like being punished by your being cast out of your church or something, or being disrespectful to God or something like that.
Yeah.
So
I think also on working with emotions, there is a need for an outlet of these emotions. I remember, Andreas, sometimes you'd make an example of like in a controlled environment. I would say, for instance, maybe people can, like act things out, more like kind of a play.
Yeah.
Let's say instead of hitting someone, then maybe hitting a tree or something along those lines to get the emotions out.
Yeah.
That's where I think of like therapy. Like therapy is usually, I think, a good place for that kind of stuff, where you can get out how you feel, and it's in a controlled environment, I guess. Usually the person, you don't really know the person, the therapist or anything, so they can be sort of there. I mean, yeah.
therapy, I think of also relates very much to the next level, which is like the vital or authenticity, because it's about finding I mean, psychotherapy or psychology sort of began with Freud questioning the way civilization represses people, and he had a theory that, you know, hysterical women are hysterical because they are like repressed and things like that by society, and so he sort of experimented with that, and so I associate that a bit more with like the next level with vitality and sensations and things like that. Release of you can release bioenergetic blockages and attaining personal substance if you act out things and things like that.
That's where I think of like when you're speaking the truth more and you're being more honest, the more like sort of.
But honesty and authenticity is not a guarantee for friendliness. That's why it's not quite. Definitely. It's not quite connected to like emotions or friendliness.
Yeah, I remember that because I remember someone arguing that with one of my friends. He was like, well, you know, me being an asshole is like the truth, you know, so I should always be an asshole because like I'm being honest and I'm being truthful. So, you know, why not? So
you need a kind of balance or integration between these levels.
Yeah.
And like education, how it can be beneficial to not always just be authentic either. You should be, you should know when to not, you know, repress yourself too much, but you also need to balance it with at least attempt to be friendly, because there can be benefits to you. People might reciprocate. What's it called in English?
Reciprocate.
Reciprocate. Yeah, and things like that. And so kindness, you have to like. And then we have the last has to do with the physical body. So the physical body. Anyone want to take a guess at? I guess he disappeared.
I suppose the army, protection forces of a nation.
Yeah, it is associated with power. I think it's on the right track. I think a bit more in terms of economy, because the people with money and resources, they can pay the army, or often the army and police and things like that, especially in like repressive states, they tend to side with power, or like power counts on police and military to sort of protect them, sometimes more than the ordinary citizen. But the economy and resources and things like that. And so, I mean, what we should do, how we should consider power, is more to be subordinate to people, because oftentimes there is a tendency for power to like exploit people and make people subordinate to itself, to power. So we should think of power as a servant for people to be like healthy and functional. Yeah,
that's where I think about when you talk about like people being able to govern themselves. Like if they truly have proper education, I guess, and they have self-control, it may be easier to relate and work with others and not let foolish, I guess, desires get in the way or cause harm to others, depending on if they're developed, I guess. Yeah. So, you know, there might not be a need to govern people or to have power over others. And I guess the only governance would be the timeless education itself, which is nothing but truth about reality. So I think, but
yeah, I mean, I guess it could be good to have some kind of power or like police or something like that is more impartial. Like we have often people regard like the US as a kind of international police force, because they often interfere and try to uphold the democracy and order. So, but they are not impartial because they belong to a specific country after all. But let's say that we had like an impartial, like international police that didn't belong to a specific country, but was made up of like individuals from all kinds of countries, and they were composed of kind of an impartial army that made sure that no nation invaded another or something like that. And then you always exchange, so the people who only served a limited time, and then they were replaced so that they wouldn't be able to like try to take over the world or something by themselves. You need to, but I think it might be useful to have some kind of like international police force in that sense, if it was more impartial and wise and understood that it was a servant that served the individual, the world and the individual countries and local communities, rather than trying to like reign on its own.
Yeah, I just see like if people really are like, especially if a majority like of the global population becomes developed, I feel like it'd be really hard to see that kind of phenomena like occurring, sort of. Well, where it'd be like, do we really need something like that? Or
yeah.
But I could understand why it'd be good to have that though. Like it'd be a good idea. But yeah, I feel like it would, like a lot of people just wouldn't be that, especially with the tendency people have to conform and sort of, not rebel. I feel like it would be, if most people were developed insane, it would be very hard for people to even like go against or to, I don't know, I've kind of thought about this, but it's really
yeah, but it also depends on like, I mean, very unforeseen things might happen, like a meteor might strike a part of the globe, and then all those people who can't live there anymore, and so they move into other countries, and there could be like ethnic conflicts and things like that. So yeah, sometimes wisdom is dependent on like having a good environment to grow in, and if there is too much stress and conflict and not enough time, then people might ignore wisdom and just focus on their own survival, and that's how you get like conflicts.
I'm thinking like if this were successful and it actually, because now I'm thinking about it, I'm like, dude, like we're not even, I'm thinking like way far, like like, oh, this is on a global scale kind of, but we're not even like, this is like a few people, like, so yeah, I understand them, because maybe what if it did like grow a little bit, but then like it got to a point where you have a country, but then another country wants to like invade that and be like, no, this is the way things are, sort of. Then what do you do? I guess those kinds of situations. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I think we can end the second exam here. That was all the questions that I had, and this was mainly for me to sort of gauge what people have taken in and things like that. And I mean, I do know a bit better now what I need to emphasize a bit more, perhaps. And I know that I haven't really repeated things too much. I have a tendency to sort of just say one thing once, and then I try to move on to a new subject and things like that. But I do think it might be good to repeat things a bit more, and that's sort of what I'm doing now in this series, where I sort of summarize the various concepts. But I hope it is. I think it might be useful for you as well to take part in an exam like this.
No, it's fun. I enjoy it.
It's been very useful. To me a lot. I think I've stressed too much on the psychosis, helomorphism, energy patterns. I mean, and I stressed on some parts of your work. I've stressed on that, and then on others not. But these I've learned now. For instance, new things. For instance, the organizational numbers and how they fit in, and so on. So a test like this has helped me to, when I go back to study again, I'll have an idea of what is it that I haven't really understood. So it helps.
Okay, so
Sorry.
I will stop.
Yeah.
I will stop the
I do
recording
really
here, and I thank you for participating in these exams. And I guess we can continue talk. Did you want to say something?
I hope we could talk more than just in exam. Like, I hope in the future we'll have more conversations where we can just discuss about different things or something that we may have found, or what we think about society, or like what's going on in the world, kind of. I feel like that'd be interesting to go more in. But, whatever. I really do enjoy this stuff, though. I found out I have this tendency to really go into things for a long time, like especially when we're talking about one concept. Like when you mention something, I go very much into it, like, and just keep going on and on and on, kind of like what I'm doing right now, sort of. But yeah.
But yeah. Okay. Thank you for participating.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for the
I'm very
opportunity.
appreciative of it. Yeah.
Thank you.